And we are now recording, and I want to say a huge welcome to this first live conversation that I'm doing. And my very first guest is Wendi Weiner. I'm delighted you're here to have you, the writing guru herself. And to introduce myself to those of you who I haven't had the pleasure of meeting, my name is Elena Deutsch, and I'm the founder of WILL, Women Interested in Leaving Big Law. And big is in parentheses because maybe you're just interested in leaving law altogether, or maybe you're in small law, whatever. Maybe you don't want to leave the law entirely, but maybe you want to leave where you are now. I do career transformation work with women attorneys who struggle to figure out what they want to do next and take action towards the life and career of their dreams. So I'm super happy. I've been running groups and I've been doing these guest speaker interviews for my clients and recording them and keeping them private for my clients. And I've had this idea to do podcasting. I haven't been able to kind of focus on making that happen yet. And I literally was in my kitchen one day and I was thinking about Wendi, because Wendi is amazing at putting, Wendi, you're amazing at putting your brand out there and who you are in this really authentic and warm way on social media, on LinkedIn, on Twitter. And I admire it so much. And we've been talking for a little while. So I'm super delighted to have you here tonight and to do this conversation with you and have you share your story about leaving big law, leaving the law, creating the writing guru, creating your whole business and your life, and hearing more about how you did that.
Awesome. Thanks so much for having me.
So let me give you a little bit more of an official introduction. So Wendi is an attorney and an award-winning writer. And you've been featured in major publications. And recently I shared your HuffPo article, How I Use My Law Degree to Get Out of the Law, which is an amazing article, which I think got you kind of a big following. And after you ran 2 marathons, you fearlessly left your decade-plus career as an attorney, and you followed your passion to do writing and help others achieve their own career dreams and success. So with that, I welcome you, the writing guru, here tonight.
Thanks so much for having me. I genuinely appreciate it. I've been really looking forward to this for quite some time, so I'm glad that we're doing it. Well, I guess I'll tell you a little bit, sort of.
Sure. Yeah. Tell us a little bit about your career trajectory, how you particularly went from being a practicing attorney to where you are now. And before you do that, people are still coming in, so welcome everyone who's come in. I'm gonna do a little interview with Wendi first, and then we'll go to the Q&A, and I'll show you then how you can chat in your questions or unmute your microphone. So those are sort of the ground rules. Have a little patience with us with the tech, and if hold your questions till later, and I'll tell you when to type them in, or we'll do some unmuting. So we're going to give this a go, and I just I invite you to put other distractions aside, to take a deep breath. We've all been like rushing. I've been so excited about this, and yeah, take a sip of water if you've got some, and just be present. You created this time for you to be here tonight, and I want you to be able to really soak it in and not be responding to emails or texts, and just be present here for yourself to soak in all this goodness. Okay, Wendi, tell us about your career transition and trajectory.
Sure. So I went to Stetson Law School, and a lot of my concentration was really in a lot of creative writing. I took a lot of jurisprudence, appellate practice types of courses. And when I began practicing law, one of the first things that I noticed was I got forced, I wouldn't say forced, but put into litigation. And it was a very contentious area of law. Either you do transaction or you do litigation. And one of the things that I noticed along the way was I just wasn't happy. I mean, I went from job to job. I started out in big law. I then made the move eventually down the road in-house. But the common denominator in every job that I had as a lawyer was no matter how much more money I was earning, I just didn't like it. I didn't like the people. I didn't like my opposing counsel. I didn't like the adversarial nature of it. I hated the billable hours. I hated the amount of face time that I had to put into the office hours. I really wanted to live life on my own terms, and I realized along the way that I was probably destined to be an entrepreneur and be my own boss, but I just didn't take the leap of faith. And really for me, the turning point, of course, was running 2 marathons and realizing, hey, I don't have an athletic prowess whatsoever, but if I can run 2 marathons, if I can run the New York Marathon and then the Chicago Marathon, I could pretty much do anything that I put my mind to. And so for me, it was one of those things where writing was always a forte of mine. I had a blog because I have thyroid problems and I've always struggled with my weight. During the journey of running the marathons, I chronicled my story, my health struggles, my weight loss struggles, all of that. And so I had already built an audience around it. And I had started my business in 2010 on the notion of just having a conversation and passing with my parents one day. For years, I had been editing people's essays and resumes. My mom said to me, well, why don't you just make it a business? You're the writing guru. And so there it was. I formulated the business, and for a very long time, it was just a side hustle. It was something that I did very much as a freelancer. I didn't really publicly advertise it. I had a website, but again, this is not during the time when LinkedIn was as popular as it is now for a job search. We're talking back in 2010, 2011. So for me, I took the leap of faith. It was actually by chance. I had, saved up a lot of money because talk about that too, because that's important.
Yeah.
And I just finally made the decision one day that, my happiness mattered more than what I was doing as a lawyer. Just because you go to school for something, if you don't have a passion for it, if you're not fulfilled, if it doesn't energize you at the beginning of the day and the end of the day, there's other things that you could do with your law degree that makes you more fulfilled and a lot happier.
Awesome. It's just, can you say a little bit more about running the marathons and what made you decide to do that? First of all, I'm someone I've always admired people who can, make themselves do that. Mm-hmm. And then just really connect those dots even a little more strongly for us.
Sure. So, I have been struggling with my health for years, and I had read a story one day about a woman who had lost a bunch of weight, and she did it by running, and she had decided to run a half marathon. And I remember thinking to myself, wow, that's so inspirational. I wonder if that's something that I could do. So I signed up for a half marathon. I actually had signed up for the Disney Princess Half Marathon in February of 2011.
Wow.
Fun race to start, and I did it. And then I was sitting and having lunch one day a couple of months later with a sorority sister of mine from college, and we were talking about the race and maybe I'd run another half marathon. She said, well, I just entered the lottery for the New York Marathon. Why don't you enter it?
Wow.
Well, maybe I found out that it takes a couple of years sometimes to get in. Well, by happenstance, I wound up getting into the marathon.
Oh my God, that's it's very rare. That's
yeah. I guess the crazy part is my grandmother was an amazing, she had an amazing ability to be lucky at casinos. And so she and my grandfather would go to Vegas twice a year, and she'd always hit the jackpot in the casino. I've always had my grandmother's gambling luck too. And so I felt like I had the luck of the lottery, and I applied the second year. So I ran in 2011. Yeah. I actually entered the lottery again in 2012, and I got into the lottery again for the marathon. So I ran it in 2011, and then in 2012, if you remember Hurricane Sandy, the marathon to be canceled. Yeah. And then I wound up running the Chicago Marathon in 2013 for a friend of mine who was a childhood friend that was going through breast cancer treatment. Wow. She was very inspirational to me. And so I decided ultimately to run the Chicago Marathon. And that is really what sparked the desire for me to leave the practice of law. Like, if I could do something that I have no athletic abilities, if I could do and complete 2 marathons, I could walk out of my career in law. I know that sounds very philosophical, but the story is a really big part of what led me to walk out of my career as a lawyer.
Yeah. Yeah. And just, as you were preparing, you talked a little bit about your side hustle. And I know both you and I are fans of Gary Vaynerchuk, and maybe I'll link to him later. But just like he talks about having a side hustle, and say a little bit more about like how you were building your resume writing business on the side, and then also how you were. So that's one part of the question. And then, how you were getting paid for that and how you were amassing and saving money to make the change out of law.
Yeah, I mean, that is a very important part of the story. It wasn't like I just walked out of my career in one day. When I started to really learn about the resume industry, it was probably at the end of 2013. I learned that you can get certified in resume writing. I learned about all these organizations. So I started to join them and get certified and get involved. And it's funny because I think about the catalyst, the one thing that really propelled me to kind of jump headfirst into it. It was, I was sitting in my apartment on a Sunday doing work, and I'll get to like kind of how I balanced everything, but I do remember getting a direct sale on my website, and this person had never spoken to me. Mm-hmm. And I remember having a conversation with them after the fact, and one of the first things I said is, shelling out a couple of $1,000s to work with someone that you've never even spoken to is a pretty scary thing in this day and age of the internet, especially because the resume industry is not a regulated industry. So if you wanted to be a resume writer tomorrow, you could very well decide to do that. And so what happened for me was, this person making a direct sale on my site led me to realize that I was truly building something very big, bigger than I probably ever imagined. When I left practicing law, I never would have imagined in 2015 that 3+ years later, my business would be where it is today. A lot of that is, obviously putting in close to 100-hour work weeks in the very beginning, but also building a name for myself that allowed me to stand out and be different in the industry, because I don't have the typical background that most resume writers have. Most of them have HR backgrounds or recruiting backgrounds. So for me, I brought something totally different to the table, and I built a massive writing portfolio that I became my own social media channels. Mm-hmm. Leads just came to me, and they still do. People find my articles all the time. If you Google my name, I'm on the first 8 pages of Google with various articles I've written. I've been which is totally different than most resume writers. Most will get a couple of features here or there. They'll write an article here or there, but they don't have the level of writing that I have amassed over a period of time, which has helped my following, of course, because content is what sells people. But for me, what really happened to grow my business was I had to work. My full-time job as an in-house attorney. And candidly, if I was working as a lawyer in, let's say, a law firm where I was billing hours and had to work weekends, I would have never have been able to build up my business to where it was when I left the practice of law.
Right.
When I was actually practicing law, and deciding to leave, I was an in-house attorney. So that was very beneficial to me because I could work standard 9 to 6 hours, go home at night, put the time into my business, and put the time in on the weekends. So on average, I was probably working like a 55-hour work week as a lawyer, and then I was working an additional 30 to 35 hours on the weekends to amass my business to where it is now.
So you really, and then you made the leap. And what made you ready to say, like, okay, I'm straddling both worlds, and now I'm ready to step over and leave the steady income and the steady job?
That's a great question. I had looked at that in 18 months. I had put away quite a chunk of money, and I knew that if I left practicing law and I didn't get any clients for 6 months, I had enough money to live off of.
Yeah.
Conservatively, of course. I mean, I wasn't shopping at Bloomingdale's and buying a new outfit for that weekend, but I had saved enough to live comfortably for 6 months without having to eat ramen noodle soup for every night for dinner. I remember distinctly driving to work on a Monday, and I remember thinking to myself, like, how much longer do I really want to do this? How much do I want to hate going to work, have the Sunday night blues, have the Monday through Friday blues, and then every Friday feel like I can't wait to go to happy hour to celebrate the end of another week? That's how my life felt. I felt I was living a double life. I was a lawyer by day, a writer by night, and on the weekends. And I also knew that I was starting to build a following to the point where I couldn't keep it hidden anymore. I mean, I was much out there publicly doing this. I don't know if my employer actually knew what I was doing, my boss knew, but my coworkers knew. And I knew that I couldn't keep myself under wraps if I wanted to continue to grow my business. And that's what I ultimately decided. I said I would give myself 6 months. If my business did not take off full time the way I wanted it to, I would have done something else with my law degree. But ultimately, I was very fortunate that I put all my energy into my business. For 2 years, I worked late nights every weekend to grow it to where it is today. So it wasn't like I was just this overnight success. And I want people to know that. Like, I didn't just get lucky or, just decide one day to go be an entrepreneur and work only 30 hours a week. It's not as glorious as people make it seem.
Yeah. So let's go into that. What do you love about it, and what are some of the drawbacks about being an entrepreneur and running your own business the way you do? Yeah.
So what I love about it is I love what I do, and I get to connect with so many incredibly amazing, talented executives. And I mean, I've worked with people who are just starting out in the practice of law. I've worked with people who have been corporate counsel at some of the largest companies earning over $1 million a year. They come to me to do their branding, and that's pretty incredible. I've had some awesome opportunities. Like, for example, I got the opportunity to write paid content for Inc. Magazine's Content Strategies division. And I just got assigned to another really big project for them. So those are the exciting things that I've been able to do. So I've got a huge portfolio. So I don't just write resumes, and I don't just write LinkedIn profiles. I'm really at the core of it, a career and branding expert. So a lot of paid content writing for businesses, for publications, writing for websites. So I am living the dream that I envisioned for myself as early as my college years. I've always wanted to be a published writer.
So let's talk a little bit more about personal branding, because that's one of the things that really, I see your stuff. I see your stuff on Twitter and LinkedIn, and I see it's so you, right? And I barely know you, but I feel like I know you much better than I do. And Wendi and I met through LinkedIn, actually. So I had posted, I was looking to get some resume and LinkedIn professional writing services who specialize in helping lawyers. And I connected with Wendi and another resume writer, Anne-Marie Segal. And there are others. So, but we had a really nice interchange. And I see your stuff, then I started following you. And please define personal branding for us. And let's start with that. I'd love to hear your definition of that.
Sure. So personal branding is really what people say about you when you're not in the room. It's more than just you for your job or your career. It's the essence of who you are as a person. And part of it becomes your elevator pitch, what you say to the outside world, what really resonates with you, how you identify yourself. And I think that's where a lot of lawyers have an issue, because when they start to think about themselves as a personal brand, they begin to realize that, hey, I'm more than just a lawyer. I'm a strategic thinker. I'm a problem solver. I'm a zealous advocate. I'm a researcher. I'm a writer. I'm a counselor for my clients. I mean, there's so many different hats that lawyers wear, right? And if you have your own law firm, you're a marketing specialist too, and you're an awesome networker. So your personal brand has to be at the core of who you are as a person, and write a lot from the heart. And I try authentic, because the idea is the way you build your brand is based on authenticity. That's how you amass a following on social media. Also, is when you share from the heart and you share your struggles. That's really important. One thing I want to touch on too is a lot of people, I see a lot of content on the daily on LinkedIn, and I see people, in my space that post 3-4 times a day, and it's the same stuff over and over again. It's, copy and paste of a client testimonial, or copy and paste of, how they can help others with their resumes and things like that. You have to give people content of value. It's the value that sells to people. When you share a story, an authentic story about yourself, or an authentic story about a struggle that can be related by anyone in that audience, not just lawyers, not just business owners, but the general public, that's how you engage with people. And that's how I build my following on social media, and my brand for that matter.
So, and that's something else I am genuinely curious, is how do you do that? Because like you put out a lot of stuff, and you do share like very much from your heart, and it comes through. It absolutely comes across. Do you batch write? Do you like dedicate time every day to write something genuine? Do you save ideas? Like, it just seems like it just flows out of you, and I think you are in the flow with your writing, and that's awesome. But I really am curious, like, what tips or suggestions you have for other people who do want to connect with others, and whether it's not on social media, but they want to write a connected cover letter. You know, they want to write an email to someone to reconnect or connect around an opportunity. And they do want it to be more heartfelt and less, robotic and just professional and stiff.
Right. So here's the thing. At the core of it, on social media and even in the business world, people connect with other people, right? That connectivity element is you have to be humanistic. You have to be open to saying, hey, I'm a human. I mess up. I have struggles too. And the moment that I started to talk about my struggles, and I was very honest with people, partly, my story in being frustrated as a lawyer, and feeling like there was no way out and feeling trapped financially, that's a huge part of my story. And, some people may say, well, hey, I don't want to share that personal stuff, but that is how I built a connection with people, by sharing my story. That article that I wrote for the Huffington Post 3+ years ago, how I used my law degree to get out of law, that is probably the most raw emotional story that I've shared, beyond like a few others I've written for Thrive Global. But the idea is, when you are raw and emotional and you put yourself out there, you allow people to really connect with you. I took a writing class for fun. I know that sounds crazy, but back in 2016.
You took a writing class where?
For fun. I took
it for fun. Yeah.
Through NYU's online.
It's not crazy. It's awesome.
It sounds crazy, right? I'm writing every day, but yet I needed to take a writing class for fun. And it was called Writing Opinion Commentary. And it was taught by a woman she had her PhD, she lived overseas. And one of the first things that she said in the class is, if you're going to write opinion commentary, you have to get comfortable with people having negative things to say about you. When you put yourself out there, you are so susceptible to people tweeting against you, people, trolling you on social media. So listen, I'm sure that I probably have a, huge following, but I also probably have a following of haters too. So that just happens, right? The more you grow, the more successful you become, the more envious people become of you, more people question it or have opinions and those things. So ultimately, one of the hardest parts of being a writer is you can't be afraid to be silent. You can't be afraid to be censored. So many times, a lot of my posts, it just depends on that day. My tweets, I generally will pre-record stuff. But there are times when I just wake up that day and I say, this is what I want to write about today. Or I'll see someone else's post on LinkedIn. It'll make me think about, what else what else I could post. Like, for example, my post the other day about, having a platform on various social media platforms is really important. I was looking at someone who was bragging about how they've written viral posts on LinkedIn. And when I went to this person's Twitter, they had only a couple of hundred followers, and their Facebook had like no followers. So I'm thinking, okay, so you've got all these followers on LinkedIn, and doesn't mean it's converting to sales, right? Because just because someone has a lot of followers doesn't mean they're getting sales. But I realized along the way, like, this person doesn't have a diversification of social media platforms.
Right.
On Instagram either. So that led me to write that post. So sometimes I'll see stuff in my news feed on a particular social media channel, and it'll just put me in tune with what I want to write that day. So I just really let the thoughts flow. That's what creatives do.
That's great. That's great. So let's kind of bring this back to women who want to leave the law or want to leave big law, or women or men. And they're working to, and this is what I help people tap into, like their skills and their interests, and kind of what are their gold nuggets, I like to call them, like the things that make them really unique and special, that they love, that are super important to them, that they want to hold on to. So how do you take that and those things that make each of us unique, like you said, our stories, and infuse that into a personal brand, and whether that's, infusing that into a LinkedIn profile or into their resume or a social presence?
Well, right. And so the first thing that I say to people all the time too is, because I'll have people that will come to me and say, hey, I want to get out of the practice of law. How can I get out? What can I do? There's nothing else I can do other than start my own law firm. And what I tell people all the time is you have to look at yourself introspectively. Like, just like you said, you have to look at what things you're good at, what things you like doing, because that's a huge part of it. When I worked at law firms, what I realized along the way, the common thread of all the firms or companies I worked for, I loved being the brief writer. I was always the designated brief writer. No one wanted to write the 20-page summary judgment motions. No one wanted to write an appellate brief. I was always that person. So writing was just my forte. I mean, even if I sat and brought my mom on the podcast, she would tell you I started writing poetry when I was 4 and 5 years old. That is just, everyone has always known me as the writer in my family. And so I went with it. That's what became my brand. And I think that if you are a lawyer and you're unhappy practicing law, first of all, there's so many things that you could do with your law degree. You can go and be a compliance officer. You can actually become a business executive. You know how many business executives I work with that want to sit in the boardroom and make business decisions, but they don't want to be in the courtroom litigating cases.
Yeah.
So your law degree is extremely powerful. I interviewed for an article in the Huffington Post a while back, a real estate salesperson, a real estate broker, extremely talented, extremely successful, and he loves what he's doing. So there's a lot of people out there that are leveraging their JD for something greater.
Yeah.
You just have to hone in on those skill sets that you like and what you enjoy. And what I actually recommend, I don't know if you do this with your clients, but there's an assessment called the Strengths Finder assessment.
Yeah,
And
I do that with them. Yeah.
I mean, people can take it online. It's $15. Figure out what you're good at, what you like doing, and then there's ways to match careers to that.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I start my work with all my clients with StrengthsFinder, and I think it's a real game changer for many people. And I recently had a client. She's like, "Oh yeah, I'm a problem solver," and many other things, of course. But it was just great. So what other guidance do you have? Before we'll go to questions in a few minutes, but let me ask this last question. What other guidance do you have for women who are thinking about leaving the law or planning on leaving?
Right. So for a couple of things. Number one, I definitely think that if you're going to leave the practice of law, you have to have a plan, right? Because there may be a pay cut. Like I mentioned, one of the things I had to do was really save my money and make sure that when I was planning my getaway from the practice of law, that I had enough money to save, money saved that I could live off of. That's extremely important. You don't want to walk out of your career, quit, and then all of a sudden you don't have a plan. So you have to have a plan, right? So obviously financially you need a plan. The other thing too is, beyond having a financial plan of how you're going to survive, know the targeted career paths that you want to go down. Start to look at and examine what other lawyers are doing outside of the practice of law. I will see often a lot of people say they want to be their own boss, and that's great. But yeah, there's a lot of freedom. If I wanted to sleep until noon every day and not work and go to the beach, sure, I could do that. But I'm probably the most disciplined when it comes to my business. And a lot of people don't realize that I actually work harder than I've ever had to as a business owner, because there's no steady paycheck coming in. If I don't work, I don't get paid. If I don't consult with clients, I don't book new clients. If I don't serve my clients, I'm not going to keep them or get so there's a lot of pressure that goes into being your own boss. If you want to start your own law firm, you're going to need startup capital. That's another thing to think about.
Yeah.
Leave the practice of law. There's other methods to networking, especially that's the best way, obviously, we talk about all the time is for a job, but really begin to explore other careers of what lawyers are doing. There's also the notion of going and working for the government. I mean, I've seen a lot of attorneys go into public affairs, not politics, but public affairs and policy development as another avenue. Some go into being educators.
Yep.
Will go into, again, business development, financial development, other areas of coaching, for example. So there are many different roads that you can go down. The most important thing that I do want to emphasize, and this is so important, is your law degree has so much weight and value to the outside business world. And you may not think about it now because you're in this microcosm of this small sector of lawyers, right? Because you don't feel valued when you're around your opposing counsel. You may not feel valued by your boss. You may not feel valued by the people you work with. Yeah. But when step outside that bubble into the business world, I can tell you that 9 times out of 10, clients come to me and are allured by me because of that law degree. Beyond publications and all the certifications and the notoriety, they almost always are enticed by the fact that I've got the law degree, because in an outsider's mind, that law degree is a powerful tool, a powerful degree. So there's a lot of doors that will open for you automatically just by virtue of having your JD.
That's right. Thank you. Yes. Amen. and
that's a tough talk for everyone.
Yeah, that's, and I think the sort of, when you've only been in one industry, if you've only ever been a lawyer, you don't know that yet, and you might feel unhappy. But I often work with women who don't really know what else they could do, that they could be a writer, that they could be a copywriter, that they could, go into so many different avenues. One of my former clients is working as the health policy director for a U.S. senator. Like,
oh, that's awesome.
No joke. It's awesome. So let me just ask you, you were saying something, I just want to share one resource with people, and then I want to ask how people can find you and get in touch with you, and then we'll open it up for questions. Sure. So you were talking about a plan, and I learn from my clients. Like, my clients teach me what else they need, right? And it's part of what I love is being responsive and really listening. So I recently created a new free gift for my clients, or anyone who wants to come by my website and get it. And it's actually about making a plan. You were talking about making a plan. So it's called Break Free, How to Make Your, and this is brand new, so I might mess it up. Oh, great. New York City, car alarms. Sorry. How to create your stress-free plan to leave big law. So I'll post a link to it, but you're all invited to go and check it out, get a free copy. This hot off the presses workbook. Let me know if you find a typo, since you're all excellent at seeing those, and it's not my skill set. So I'll post the link to that in a minute. But Wendi, how can people find you?
Sure. I mean, obviously you can Google me and find me, but the best places to find me are on LinkedIn. My website is writingguru.net, N-E-T. You could also find me on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook. I have a Facebook business page. And I welcome you the opportunity. In fact, I'll go ahead and type in the...
Yeah, go ahead. Type that in there in the chat so people can see that. And then, Wendi, while you're typing that in, let's get ready for some Q&A. So there's 2 ways we could do it. You can chat it in if you don't want to talk, or if you hover your mouse over the bottom of the screen and you look at the Manage Participants, if you click on that, you should be able to raise your hand. Then you'll see the list of people's names on the right, and there should be a raise hand button. So if you do that, do people see that? Chat in if you see that. Do you see the opportunity to raise your hand? You don't see the raise your hand, Cindy. Okay, so if you wanna just talk to Wendi and ask Wendi your questions, then just type in that. Just keeping an eye on the chat that you wanna me to unmute you. So you can either type in your question, or if you say, please unmute me, I have a question, go ahead and type that in the chat, and then I'll unmute you. And I'm sure some of you have questions.
So while we're waiting for people's questions, one of the things too that I wanted to mention as well is one of the frustrations that I had when I was practicing law was I felt very trapped by the profession. And I wish that I had met someone like you, Elena, to talk to at the time. I felt like my parents, they didn't really understand. As close as I was to them, they didn't understand. I have a brother who's a lawyer. He's a prosecutor, absolutely loves it. And so he was going through law school and practicing at the same time as I was, and because we're 5.5 years apart.
Wow,
one of the struggles that I had was, here was my brother who's uber successful, so happy practicing law, and here I am miserable as a lawyer. And so I felt like no one else really understood what I was going through. The only people who may have understood my frustrations were my friends who are lawyers, but other than commiserating with me at happy hour, they didn't provide solutions how to get, because they themselves didn't know how to get out. So, it's different going to see a therapist who, yes, is an impartial party, but doesn't really understand and doesn't really necessarily provide you with the tools the way that a coach does. And so, I feel like it's kismet that we met now, but I definitely think that maybe things would have turned out differently had I met you.
Well, I like to, okay, we've got a question, and I'll just respond to this, and Victoria will get your question. I like to, people, you don't know what you don't know. And so I work with clients to lay out a step-by-step plan and approach to leaving big law, to turning down those inner critics in your head and learning how to navigate your family, your friends, and the people you need to explain it to. And I think women in general, like we take care of everybody before us. And so by investing in coaching for yourself to help you through this process, because it's not about like, oh, why am I unhappy? Why? It's not, that's therapy. Coaching is about like forward now and forward.
And making a plan, someone to work on a plan with you. When you go to therapy, you're just really expressing your discontent, but there's not really ways or methods or coaching methodologies to work through it. It's a totally different process. So, and I get people all the time who come to me and say, hey, how do I get out of law? And I can tell them my story and I can share where I think they could go, but having a counselor there with them, a lot of people that I will turn away from working with because they need a coach first. They need that career coaching to build up confidence, to help establish a plan, to establish goals. That's really, really important. And so, and someone just asked that question. So I'm glad you gave your contact info.
Yeah.
We're going to help a lot of people.
Thanks. I'm trying. I'm here, and I'm like you, I had a successful consulting and coaching business with a business partner, and he wanted to go more into healthcare leadership development, and I was coaching women lawyers to either ascend or leave. And I loved that, and I wanted to make that the focus of my business. So it's really been, for the last year, I gave birth to Will and have been working on it. So, and it's so much fun. It's so rewarding.
Yeah.
So I think it was Victoria you were asking. So I put in my email. I'm happy to have a conversation if you'd like after. And in my conversations with people, I really listen to what you need, and if I can't meet that, I make referrals all the time. So, and I'm happy to, and I'm always expanding my network of other coaches and people in this industry. Like I connected with Wendi. Okay, so let's get some questions. I saw, oh my goodness, now they're shrinking. Okay, so here's one question. Did you ever feel like you were giving up a big part of yourself when you left? I feel very connected with my career as a lawyer, even though I want to leave.
That's a great question. So I actually felt it was really hard on me to walk out of practicing law initially. I felt like a failure. I felt like I had wasted and invested $150,000 in my legal education. I went to Stetson Law School, which is a private school. It's a lot of money that I took out. And like most lawyers, I went to private law schools. I put a huge chunk of money that I could have bought a house with. I felt that I had disappointed my parents. That was like one of the big things that weighed heavily on me. Like they had one child who was a successful lawyer, and then me, who's the person that left. And I internally at the time, I felt like such a failure. Like I had worked so hard to go through law school, to take the bar exam, pass the bar exam, and then all of a sudden I just decide one day that's it, I've had enough and I'm throwing in the towel. And I remember going to networking events in the beginning, and I remember telling people that I was a lawyer, but I also, was writing resumes. And I remember someone saying to me, oh, you went to law school, you're a lawyer, you probably made six figures. Why would you write resumes? I remember having this conversation with someone and going home that day feeling bad about myself because I was less than. But you know what? Now, where I am in terms of my business, my success, the prolific nature of what I do, I feel professionally more successful as an entrepreneur than I ever felt as a lawyer. And I think that once you find happiness in your career within yourself, you're going to feel at ease and not feel that there's an issue or something wrong with you or you've let people down. It's when you find that internal happiness that you become very confident at what you're doing.
Yeah, I love that. It's happiness is an inside job,
It is.
and it's certainly, we can take hits from other people, but it's when you, that was beautiful. When you realize, like, I'm actually in control of my happiness, and like, I'm going to have more success in my business than I would this other way.
Yeah.
Like, it sounds like you just felt so fulfilled.
Yeah, and you know what? There were things that I liked about being a lawyer. Let me just make that everyone understand that I was very successful as a lawyer. I had an in-house job. I had a company car. I was making 6 figures. I mean, on the outside, to an outsider, I had it all as a lawyer. I had that coveted in-house counsel job, but internally, I just wasn't happy with what I was doing. And it took me a long time, a lot of my own self-talk, and ridding myself of those demons and those really bad critics, because we're our own worst critic, for me to actually come out of my shell and be really proud of what I do. And you know what? Not only am I more professionally advanced and I feel more successful professionally, but I'm also financially in a lot better place than when I practice law now. I'm more financially successful than I ever was as a lawyer. So it just takes time to arrive at that point and become happy with your internal clock and your internal soul. And then it won't really matter what others think. I know that sounds really cliche and trite, but it really is true.
Good. All right, we've got another question. If I want to go into another field altogether away from law, how do I change my LinkedIn and other social media profiles that are concentrated solely on my legal experience?
That's a great question. So depending on the area that you want to transfer over into, for example, I just finished a project with a client who is an attorney and is very interested in compliance work. So AML, Bank Secrecy Act work, and I made sure to put that stuff in the LinkedIn profile as well as in the resume, because that's really important. So you're obviously not going to change your branding statement so much on your LinkedIn profile, because then your employer may catch wind of it, but you can definitely drop things into your profile that show you those transferable skills that you have. And definitely, Diane, if you have additional questions, feel free to reach out to me and I can provide some suggestions.
Great. For the course, I interviewed Anne-Marie Segal, the other resume writer who I know is a good colleague of yours also. Yeah, she talked about straddling and about sort of deconstructing your skills, like legal skills, like taking depositions or writing briefs or whatever it is that you did, and pulling the skills out of there that could be or lay, like taking it out of legalese and putting it into lay language. So correct. Deposition taking is interviewing skills and listening skills and building rapport with people. Mm-hmm. And those are skills.
Right. I mean, for example, let's say that you want to go into an executive career as a vice president of business development. Obviously, one of the important things of practicing law is client relationship management, how you manage your clients, the client communications, those types of things, growing the book of business for the law firm. Those are all heavily transferable skills that you could put in your LinkedIn profile that don't have to have legalese attached to it.
Great. Other questions? These are great questions. Anyone else?
One thing that I did want to say that we had talked about early on is for the women who are struggling with balancing family life and practicing law. I think that's really important to note, because I think one of the struggles that a lot of women have, especially the ones that I've worked with, is the balance of being a mom, being a wife, having the career, and then feeling like you can't give it all to everything. It's so hard to find that balance. So, definitely balance is something that's very difficult for me now as an entrepreneur. And it seemed like it was so much easier when I was practicing law and working a standard 9 to 5 or 9 to 6 or 9 to 7 schedule. But as a business owner, and I know you can appreciate this too, it's hard because you don't have standard work hours. You can work all the time. Most days, probably like you, I can sit in my pajamas or exercise clothes and work, for 12 hours straight and not even think twice about leaving the house. And so one of the things that is difficult too, as much as I felt like it was when I was a lawyer, is the balance. You're making time to work out and all of those things.
Yeah, absolutely. I definitely struggle with that too. And I do have some routines and habits that help me. But, right now I'm like, I love what I'm doing so much that like, I force myself to take off on Saturdays. Like I don't check email. I kind of take my own real whole day off. But then on Sundays, I'm sort of back to it. And then Monday, I'm really excited and really happy because I'm back to work. So and I think when it depends on who you are. And if you're a creative type and you want to grow something, it's really fun. I mean, it's challenging. It can be isolating. I work to make these connections with other people like I have with Wendi, and I have, mastermind buddies and people I can call, like if I really need to just talk through something. But, it is a lot of alone time. And for someone like me who's an extrovert, that's actually, I need to make sure I get out and go to some networking things and have lunch and coffee dates to balance that out.
It's funny when I think about the beginning stages of my business, when I first dove into this full time, how much more extroverted I was and how much I've become much more introverted now because I'm so busy and I'm, obviously not just client work, but I'm so busy. Like I'm the president-elect of the Resume Writers Association. Yeah. I devote 10 plus hours a week to that as well. And I'm extremely busy with, handling things for the Resume Writers Association. And then on top of it, client development or just, balancing married life and family life and all that stuff. And so it is very hard. One of the things that I had to do is I bought a Peloton bike, which is, I love that thing. I always talk about it. I feel like I could be like one of their marketing people. But that has helped me tremendously because I don't have to leave the house anymore to work out. It's a lot easier for me to get my workout in and make the time. And I think one of the hardships that I felt when I left practicing law up until recently was I wasn't making enough time for myself. Yeah. And you become very enveloped in your work when you are a business owner so that you sometimes lose sight of things going on outside. I mean, I'm just now starting to get back into, taking a lunch break every once in a while and going out for lunch with a friend or a family member or something like that. Because for a very long time, I haven't been doing that. I've really been glued to my desk, nose to the ground, doing my work. And so I would always see people on Instagram going out for these delicious lunches and I wonder, when did they get their work done? Maybe they have a team so they can do that stuff. But I really never took time to go, for myself. Yeah. For a couple years. So I'm actually really glad when I hear people balancing entrepreneurship. It is something that I'm a little envious of. That's one thing that I struggle with is the balance of entrepreneurship and being able to walk away, because when you are the business owner, it feels like your baby. Whereas when you work for someone else, I really don't want to go in on a Saturday, because then you're working for the man. Yeah. For yourself, working on a Saturday is not that big of a deal because you're reaping everything that you sow. Yeah.
Well, it's, I think we talked a little bit about Gary Vee, and I'll type his name in here. So if people want to Google him up, they can.
I'm actually seeing him next week.
I know you posted that. And then I was excited that you were going to be able to share some Gary Vee tips, but you said it's May 2nd.
Yeah, May 2nd. It's funny. I realized that I got the weeks confused. And when I responded, oh, wait, it's May 2nd, he actually liked my tweet. And that literally made my day because I'm obsessed with him. One of the things that I love about him compared to, for example, Grant Cardone, I used to follow Grant Cardone a lot. And he has a lot of knowledge in business development and sales. But, the thing that drives me crazy is when you're posting about your Rolls Royce and the watches and the private jets, it's funny. I remember I was practicing law. I used to live like a lawyer, and now I feel like I live like a law student. I'm much more frugal with my money, and I have more of it, I think, because I make more. I'm also much more frugal. You know, I could afford to drive a really nice car, but I'm happy driving a Camry because it's more practical for someone like me that has a home-based office. Whereas when I was a lawyer and I wanted to roll up to court in a really nice car or show up to a deposition to, you know, in a nice car, those things mattered more. You know, shopping at Bloomingdale's was much more important then, whereas now I'll shop at Old Navy. And, you know, then I had a lot of credit card debt, now I have none. So it's a totally different lifestyle. And I feel like Gary Vaynerchuk speaks to that element of being humble. You know, he does a lot of his presentations in jeans and a t-shirt, and that's part of his brand, by the way. He's not showing up in a $5,000 Armani suit. And that's the one thing that I love about him is he's very honest and raw. I mean, sometimes he curses a little too much for my taste, but what I really enjoy about him and find inspiring is he talks about the hustle and that nothing for free, and you have to like focus on yourself. And you know, you want to be an entrepreneur, but it's not sitting there on a vacation, you know, drinking a pina coladas poolside. It's working on a Friday night at 10 o'clock at night to make your dream come true. And that authenticity is what I love. And so I've strayed away from people kind of like Grant Cardone who only show like that millionaire lifestyle, because that's not really what happens. And I understand that there's an element of people who want that millionaire lifestyle, so they, you know, kind of follow him because of that. But I like that Gary Vaynerchuk is very raw and honest and kind of speaks to the middleman, you know, the young entrepreneur who's up and coming and the young hustler. I like that about him a lot.
Yeah. The other thing I love about Gary Vee is a few things. His focus on empathy, his focus on generosity, on giving value, and you touched upon that, like giving real value. Like I try in all my blog posts or things I share, I try and give real value, or, you know, things I'm sharing with my mailing list and clients. But the other thing that I love, and I think this might be a good place for us to wrap, is you have to do. He talks about doing. He says, go and do. And, you know, you may have fought your way into a legal career and fought your way into law school, and, you know, you're paid to think as a lawyer, but that's not what's going to get you out. What's going to get you out is doing, is talking to people, is taking, you know, that inventory of yourself, of what you really want, of learning from people like Wendi, like, what do you like about this? What don't you like about it? And experimenting and having some of those conversations. So he's all about taking action and doing to learn. And that's something that I love, that, you know, you'll learn something. And, you know, I've got people who are pushing me I'm going to do a workshop soon, a live workshop I'm going to offer. And I'm a little like, oh, should I do it or not? And, you know, one of my mastermind buddies is like, go and do it. You'll learn. Even if you fail, you will learn.
Yeah. I spent one day working and listening to a lot of his podcasts and some of his, you know, public speaking engagements. And I just feel like the cursing can be a little much with him, but it's part of like his brand anyway. Yeah. But what I, again, love is the fact that he talks about taking action. You know, you've got this dream, do it. Because, you know, he always talks about how the power is in the execution. You hear people talking about, oh, I'm going to do this and I'm going to do that, and they're all talk and no action. And so, you know, the fact that he talks about executing on that plan, going for that goal, you know, stop complaining, stop worrying about the hustler, you know, the people who are the haters, be the hustler. And so I love that.
Yeah, I agree. All right. Well, I think this is a great place to wrap. I'm going to stop the recording after I say thank you so much, Wendi. And for everyone who joined tonight and asked your questions, thank you. Thank you. For the people who showed up tonight, if you want a recording of this, let me know and I will send you a recording. But if you weren't here,